Whitney is the Vice President of Customer Success at ZoomInfo, where she leads post-sales strategy for one of the most widely used go-to-market intelligence platforms.
Putting people into that position where they don't have all of the information, it allows you to double-click and how much depth do you really have on the topic? When we open a role, we have hundreds of applications come through. Being thoughtful about your review, being thoughtful about how you're going to use automation or AI to get through those resumes.
We were chatting a little bit about work-life balance. Is that a yellow flag to ask about? Is it a red flag to ask about it?
What it immediately signals to me, you don't have the skill set to be really effective with your prioritization, and you're looking for someone else, whether the company, your boss, externally, to manage your time for you.
Welcome to Whispered Hiring, the podcast where we talk with senior leaders about how they find, vet, attract, and grow world-class go-to-market talent. I'm Josh Hannewinkle, GM at Whispered. Today, I'm joined by a leader who's helped shape how modern customer success teams operate at the intersection of data, AI, and revenue execution, Whitney Littman. Whitney is the Vice President of Customer Success at ZoomInfo, where she leads post-sales strategy for one of the most widely used go-to-market intelligence platforms. She sits at the center of how revenue teams adopt data, operationalize insights, and turn intelligence into real customer outcomes. Prior to ZoomInfo, Whitney spent 7 years in executive CX roles at DocuSign. Across her career, Whitney has built and scaled customer success organizations inside complex, high-growth environments with a focus on driving adoption, retention, and expansion by deeply aligning CS with sales, marketing, and revenue operations. More recently, she's become a strong voice on how AI-powered go-to-market systems are changing the role of customer success, pushing her teams beyond reactive support and into true revenue and execution partnership. Whitney, welcome. I'm thrilled to have you on.
Josh, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, when you and I were prepping for this, we talked a little bit about evergreen recs and how there could be some controversy around them. And I would love just to hear how you define maybe what an evergreen requisition is and then, when you use them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from the candidate experience and the hiring experience, you have two different kind of points of view on this. I think evergreen recs, in my point of view, are just recs that you kind of have out there on your website, on your careers page, on LinkedIn, that are constantly sourcing for high quality talent. You've got your job descriptions, and you kind of always have an influx of inbound activity who are interested in joining your company. I think it's incredibly helpful as a hiring manager to kind of have that pipeline, because if you think about it, if you don't have an evergreen rec, it means I'm opening a role when I have an open territory, which means best case, you have another CS resource or another rep covered those accounts. You have a leader covering those accounts, or worst case, nobody's touching them. And so anything we can do to speed up that sourcing to person in seat, that's where I find a huge amount of value in having that evergreen pipeline going.
And then what about, I think we were talking a little bit about talent acquisition and maybe some pushback there sometimes too on keeping those roles open for significant amount of time.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. I think in any hiring cycle, I think, especially for us at ZoomInfo, when we open a role, we have hundreds of applications come through, which is an incredible position to be in, to have that kind of interest in joining the team and joining the company. But it's a huge amount of drain for a TA team or a recruiting team to get through quickly and really effectively to weed through that when you have your hiring manager putting a lot of pressure on, who's in the pipeline? Who can I talk to? Where are the screening process? And so I think when you think about those evergreen recs is TA has time to go through. If you're going to get that kind of inbound, you can spend more time being thoughtful about your review, being thoughtful about how you're going to use automation or AI to get through those resumes and actually find the talent that you really need. Now, on the controversial comment earlier, from a candidate experience, it's not great to put into your resume and know that there's not actually an open role. And so I think that's where TA really needs to be about, how do you make sure you're being thoughtful about explaining to the candidate where we are in the hiring process, where we're going, how this is doing, and actually keeping those people warm or being very transparent about what's going on. When you think about rep, the roles open pretty frequently and pretty often. So you're not talking about someone who's going to be in cycle, who's sitting there for months and months and months before there's an open role. But I think from the TA side, it allows us to be a lot more thoughtful about who we're bringing through and who we're moving through versus feeling really rushed and cramped, because I know I will get on my recruiting team's case of like, I haven't seen anyone. Where are we? We opened the role a couple weeks ago and they are trying quickly to get through like an incredible queue. But if you're constantly going through that queue, you've got a much better chance at getting really quality talent through at a high velocity.
Yeah, I think you'd mentioned getting like a lot of applications for this. How do you keep that from overwhelming your talent acquisition team?
I think that's the $1 million question. If anyone's nailed how we can go through that, I'm always open to more ideas. I think the big thing everyone talks about is AI screening. I think there's always the like keywords on application. You've got a lot of recruiting tech out there that kind of helps you weed through. I think where we work a lot as hiring managers is being very specific every time we are going to market with a new role or a team on what we're looking for. That's everything from skill set and experience to like specific companies or types of companies that we can look through to help the team quickly see like, oh, we're looking for someone who has this level of data expertise. We're looking for someone who's worked with this type of industry or company before. We're looking for someone who is in this specific market segment, who really understands an enterprise company or really understands as SMB company. The way we work really with our recruiting teams is making sure we're really specific about the type of person so that when we look at a resume, when you look at a cover level, when you look at those, a LinkedIn profile, you can quickly look through and say, okay, I want financial services backgrounds. So making sure that that's easily stands out. I really want this type of tech background. I want this segment background. The more descriptive we can be allows us to get through those resumes in a much more thoughtful manner and make sure that we're having people who really do fit the profile of who's going to be successful in the role long term.
Talk to me about where you draw the line. I'm assuming we're mostly talking about individual contributor roles here, but like, is that, would you do this for a director in terms of evergreen? Do you have the volume where that would make sense?
I don't love evergreen for leadership roles, and I don't know. Maybe that's partially because of the volume of when leadership roles open director plus, they're few and far between. So we're not talking about high velocity positions. So if you had an evergreen rec out there for a director, like it could be months, it could be a year, it could be longer before something that like that actually opens up. And by the time you get to that, like having a generic job description out there for that kind of a level of a role doesn't always make sense. Oftentimes when we're looking for that level, I'm looking for something specific. I'm looking at the team structure and what skill set are we missing going forward. I'm looking for a specific segment. Sometimes, and this actually happened to me at the beginning of this year, I had a director leave for a new opportunity. It was a great opportunity for him. But when I was looking at the team construct, was looking at potentially backfilling, we actually decided to close the rec entirely. And I pivoted it into additional reps. And I had a senior leader already on the team who was very capable to stretch into that scope and step into that scope. And so having an evergreen out there for kind of like indefinitely without any sort of rec just seems like when you talk about the controversy of like the candidate experience versus the hiring manager experience, it kind of gets worse for the candidate experience because you're looking for something very specific. You may not have that in queue. And transparently, so much of our senior leadership comes from networks, people you've worked with in the past, people you know, that it doesn't seem to make the same level of sense to have that just sitting out there for an extended period of time when I know by the time I actually get to that role, I'm probably going to reevaluate the job description. I'm going to reevaluate the scope. I'm probably going to look at the whole team structure because sometimes on that senior level, depending on how high you're talking about, you may also be talking about a reorg as well. And so thinking through that really thoughtfully before you just directly have a online posting of some sort of senior level leadership out there that just develops a queue. You don't get the same advantages from TA because they can't source and screen and start keeping people warm who fit really well versus not if they don't know in months or years' time if your strategies are going to change, your priorities are going to change. You're going to think about how that fits within your organization slightly differently. As a result, people just are kind of sitting there indefinitely in that space.
Yeah,
Which is why it makes a lot more sense for an individual contributor role than it does for a leadership level.
yeah, makes good sense. I'm curious too if you stick with the kind of the leadership hiring, just how has that changed for you over time? And if so, how? In terms of how you're like sourcing people, um, maybe 10 years ago, 5 years ago versus today.
It's a great question. I'm thinking about like sourcing. I think the network has always been an incredible lever in the space, especially as customers. I think the customer success realm is interesting because depending on what the organization is you work for, customer success means a whole range of things depending on the organization. That's everything from like your reactive, scaled customer success or digital customer success, all the way to like you have organizations out there with OpenAI, Palantir that have like forward deploy engineering, which is sort of in that customer success realm. And so the scope of that is like you're looking at networks and you're often looking at different profiles. Like my background before I moved into customer success was a professional services, we were looking at when we were in DocuSign, looking for more technical because we're talking to IT organizations and kind of the back office type functions to go through that. And so network's been big. The other part that's also very interesting that we look at, I've been doing a lot more of recently, is actually the customer ecosystem. That is, I don't know how people feel about this, but hiring from your customers who already know your product, who are in theory at the time great champions that can come in and come through the door and have a really strong point of view. And especially in customer success roles, understanding what the customer experience is through your organization and saying what's worked, what doesn't work is a really interesting way. And being at ZoomInfo, working with other go-to-market leaders, like our customers are our types of roles. And so it's a really interesting way to kind of build the network and think about talent to bring into your organization. And they come in specifically with your customer's point of view and that customer success-centric mindset right off the bat because they have received your services and they have probably a strong opinion, good or bad, about what is working and not working in the market.
I've been on the end of a few cease and desist phone calls, probably related to hiring customers. So a line that it can be a great strategy. Is there a point where that hits a line for you? Have you had any trouble hiring out of customers
getting
and
the
getting
cease and
pushback?
desist letter is definitely one of those lines that I think you don't want to go over. I think it is a careful thing to think about. Like if you're in theory grabbing from a customer, you're grabbing your champion, and it becomes, where are you putting that at risk? Are you putting at risk really, making that customer mad because you stole great talent? I think this is where you have to be really thoughtful about the relationships you build with your customers. How do you talk to them? Is it very much the transactional relationship? Or are you actually getting to the point where you're changing strategy, things like that? I usually default a lot to their lead. I have had customers come and ask me for referrals for different leaders of, hey, I'm hiring for XYZ. Scaled customer success has come up a couple times recently with 2 customers reaching out, asking if I had any great referrals because they're building their scaled team. They're growing their business. They're starting to get to a volume of customers and they need to think about a non-high touch model. It's really, I think, kind of similar to, doing customer success. You got to follow the lead of what your customers are thinking and then understanding and being thoughtful about where you see an opening and where you don't see an opening in making that kind of move, offer, inquiry of interest to make an adjustment.
Yeah, that's great. You touched on it a little bit too, just around like the competitive advantage you can get out of this. Both from like recruiting, but also probably customer experience that they can give to others. Can you speak a little more about some of the benefits there?
Yeah. ZoomInfo is a unique position because our customers are the go-to-market leaders and RevOps leaders, the people that we work with. I think the thing about the space with us, I think there's an incredible competitive advantage with like moving leadership around and being involved in that part. We're extremely loyal type roles where, I mean, how often have you worked with a customer where they have brought in a new CRO or a new leader and they've ripped out his tech stack that works really well just because they have a preference to someone else because of a past experience, a relationship they have. So much of what we do is relationship based, and these kind of roles move around quite a bit. That being part of that and being part of that thread, you will get ins and that competitive advantage to like kind of walk into another organization or talk to another organization just because you have that relationship. You've helped in their career, you've driven impact in their organizations before, becomes a really compelling way to stay involved, both from a growth side from your organization and your things, but also from the network on making sure that you're really working with incredible talent in and around your teams.
And then we kind of started on this talking a little bit about network and how you leverage that for leadership hiring, especially. I'd be curious if there's things you're doing to actively maintain that network and what they are, like what works for you.
I had a leader earlier in my career who would always ask, like, who are the two people I had coffee with this week? There is just this constant, I think people think sometimes with network, like you have to be constantly checking in, constantly going through there. I think you can actually allow for like quite a bit of time. Like even you and I, like it's been how long since we have chatted with each other, but like we'll always pick up the phone and take the phone call. It's just this constant like connection, being responsive, and just having coffee, checking in, saying hi. I don't think it requires a huge amount of effort. I think a lot of people are intimidated by networking because it just seems like this ongoing thing of like, how many poor people do I have to talk to on a weekly basis when all of us are on the phone hours and hours of a day? But yeah, I use that. I kind of anchor on that thing that my leader told me before. She's like, who are the two people you're going to have coffee with for no purpose other than to understand who they are, understand what they do, understand what they care about, and get to know them on a more personal level versus just in the meeting or the business review where you're talking about the facts of the situation. Like, how do you build that? How do you, we go to customer on-sites all the time. Like, how do you think about coffee or dinners around that and taking the little extra effort to just see someone when you're in the area or in the neighborhood? I use it as, it's a key part of our jobs, but it's just that constant, like, find the opportunities where it's natural, and just continue to build that as a practice, and ask. And there's some weeks where I'm like, wait, I didn't have coffee, figurative coffee. That's not always a coffee in person, but with anyone this week. And as a result, I'll put a third one on the following week.
Yeah. I'm going to do better next week. I'm going to catch back up. One of the things that we talked about in prep for this was just the importance of presentations and that they can kind of be a make or break moment. What specifically are you looking for as you think about candidate presentations?
I wish I could do candidate presentations first, but I am fully aware of the time and the effort it takes to put into one of those thoughtfully. There's three things that I look for in candidate presentations, and we, frankly, at all levels, we do it here. Is number one, are you going to set yourself up for success? That goes from before you even get in the room to present what you're going to present. Are you going to spend the time to make sure you understand the prompt correctly? Are you going to run cycles with me to just talk through the data? Because normally when we give a presentation or a case study, it's a prompt and a data set. So that's number one. The second part is going to be that I look for is, are you going to take a stand and do you have an opinion? Are you going to try to accomplish everything and you're kind of wishy-washy because we want to show your flexibility, or do you actually have an opinion based on past experience on what works and what doesn't work? I don't even necessarily care if it's right or not or aligns to our strategy, but can you form a opinion on the data, opinion on the case study that logically can follow a flow. And then the third part, of course, is why I think anyone does it is like, can you tell a story and can you present and articulate your point of view in a really effective way? I've seen these go incredibly well. I've also seen people crash and burn who I thought were incredibly strong candidates coming into that. The couple ways that I've seen things is actually recently, we've been hiring for a senior sales leader here. And I've been part of all the interview rounds where we've talked to people and they come across really articulate, great in the actual one-on-one conversations. And then you get them to the presentation round. And I've seen one, they don't actually answer the prompt. There was one presentation that I went into and I was like, wait, did we change the prompt before we started this? And I'm looking at something like the wrong thing. And the person didn't just ask the question or reiterate to us, this is what I see, this is what I understand, and this is what I'm planning on presenting. As a result, they actually missed the question entirely. It's always one of those things. I know for me, I want you to come back and make sure you understand what I'm asking you to present to me. It's the same as I think about you prepping for a business review or an executive presentation. Like, are you going to run the agenda by your stakeholders in that meeting ahead of time so that you don't flub in that meeting? Like, do you do what you need to do to prepare yourself ahead of time? And then do you walk into the meeting to set the stage? What assumptions did you make? What decisions did you do? I know it's all this kind of an interesting controversial thing. Like, did you use AI or not? I'm okay with you using AI. Just admit you used AI, and like, how did you use it, and how did it apply? And then on the other side that I've seen recently as well in this round is just complete, because it's a data package, an inability to talk to that and interpret data. And so we will do different things. Sometimes it's a data set about a customer that we have whitewashed, or sometimes it's like, hey, how would you decision on this territory strategy? And I've actually had someone come in, show a presentation, and then flip between 4 or 5 different spreadsheets while trying to explain what was coming across. And I got more and more confused as we were going through, and it kind of re-solidified, like, okay, can you explain and simplify topics to actually influence and get your point of view across? I think those are putting people into that position where they don't have all of the information is an interesting way of like, okay, it allows you to double click and like, how much depth do you really have on the topic? And then number 2 is, can you formulate a thought and opinion in a cohesive thread to convince me at the end of the thing that you actually, like, you're selling us? Like, can you convince me to buy you effectively at the end of it? Or did I get lost in the narrative? Or did I miss the point? Or like, worst case scenario, you just missed the question on the prompt entirely, and we're now talking about something that I didn't ask you about. It's really interesting. You see people shine in these moments, and you see people things. I feel like it's like it really clearly separates you into the, I have to hire you right now, or it was great meeting you, and we wish you best in your career.
Yeah, I've definitely found the same thing. I think what's interesting about it too, and some of the conversations we've been having a lot within the Whispered community, especially, is like there's this tension at the same time of like, how do you give somebody a prompt that is small enough that it's reasonable? And I think on the hiring side, I'm always like, oh, this will take an hour, this will take 2 hours. And then when you're on the candidate side, I think it's very consistently like, it's 5-10 hours of work to go do a good job, not end up in the world of looking at spreadsheets, right? And how do you think about balancing those two ends of this? Because I agree with you, it's such an important step in the process.
It is hard because I think when we create these, I think we're on the same side as yours. Like, oh, this should take an hour or 2. But I think we sometimes forget that like we have all the other context of the business.
Yes, yeah.
We've been living and breathing this. So when we see the data, we immediately know what the data means, what the column headers are, how that was calculated. I think it is a hard lift. And I know like, I've had to put case studies together, and it has taken me 10, 12 hours to do a good job. I think it's seeing someone put that commitment in, and then also meeting that as a hiring manager, I'll use the example of when I was interviewing for ZoomInfo, and I had to do my case study, and my current leader spent 90 minutes to a little longer on the phone with me, walking through the data to make sure that what I was reading and what I was interpreting was indeed how ZoomInfo reads and interprets that data. I remember at the time being like, this guy's going to think I'm an absolute, like, have no idea what I'm talking about, or this is going to turn out well. But I think if you also equally meet the candidate and show the investment in them, it is okay. And it's kind of point that it goes back to like, are you going to set yourself up for success? And are you going to ask for the clarification and ask for the help to make sure that you can hit the point? It shows a level of like dedication and care, and that like you actually are serious about this process. But then you can also, as a candidate, understand how much are we going to invest in you to make sure that you are going to be set up for success. And that, because when you interview, like, this is like how I hire, but like we're also, through that process, we have to sell you on us too. So I think it's a really interesting way for the candidate to understand, like, are we just going to like send you off and hope for the best? Or are we going to meet you and collaborate and show you what kind of like the teamwork is going to look like, what it's going to like to work with me, all that kind of stuff throughout the process. It's in serious investment, which is why I don't do it first. I want to make sure I'm fairly certain that if I ask you to put this kind of effort in, we're both pretty sure of each other. But it is definitely disappointing when you see someone and you think you're pretty sure of them and they come into the presentation and go, wow, I misjudged that situation entirely. It's really great when they come in and you're like, nailed it. I knew in the first 5 minutes you were the one. This is awesome.
Yeah, or in some cases, it's even better than you would have expected. And I've definitely run into those.
I've definitely had a couple people surprise me where I was like on the fence going in, and I had someone convince me to give them a shot, and they show up and I'm like, wow, that was impressive. That's great.
I also just reflect back your point on just like that this is a test, it's a testing ground for the candidate too. And is the company also going to lean back in and answer questions and be available and get a sense of what it's like to work with somebody, since you're, going to likely go commit for a few years to come into the company as well. So I think that's just an excellent point. One of the things I'm also seeing is it seems like a lot of the prompts and potentially responses are being written by AI now, and that has benefits in terms of maybe efficiency to get things done on both sides. It's also got downsides, which is in some cases probably less thought being put into it, to the prompt itself or to the response. Have you changed your approach in terms of how you're evaluating? And if so, how?
Yeah. I think AI it has caused an interesting like wrinkle in the hiring process and the candidate evaluation and even employee like performance. I've talked to companies who refuse to let AI be used internally because they don't know how to evaluate and they haven't evolved their performance management and their criteria to accommodate that. I've also worked with them talked to companies who are like on the complete opposite scale. I don't know. I guess the way I fall into this is like the reality is like everybody is using it, especially in our state. So ZoomInfo is takes an AI first approach. So like I actually want you to use the most innovative technology and innovative tools you can to make yourself successful. I think that is an incredible differentiator and way to give yourself an edge to be more competitive and more successful in your job. I just want you to admit you're doing that. I'm okay with we had a candidate recently who actually in the presentation round was saying, I used AI for this, but then layered on the critical thinking necessary to make sure that the AI was, one, correct, interpreted correctly for the prompt, and that they had an opinion on how it was constructed. So you could kind of see the evolution of where it started with the initial data analysis to like where the actual presentation landed. And I thought that was an incredibly thoughtful way to go about it, because I think the reality is like AI is not the end all be all. You ask a bad prompt, you're going to get a bad answer. There is still hallucination, there's still exaggeration, and frankly, like we can all still see it. We haven't gotten so sophisticated now that like it's not you miss it in that frame. As a result, like on our prompt creation, like I use it to clean up the language, make sure it's clear, validate, all of those types of things. It's kind of boring AI work, but like why not make your job a little bit easier It's still on the human, though, to actually critically think through, like, does this logically make sense? Is it positioned and toned in the right way? We will occasionally see this. I'll run a summary on an account. I'm like, well, this is a little bit of an exaggeration or a little more dramatic than I need it to be. And so you have to tone it down. I think using the tools at your disposal, it's the same as when you start the job. We're going to give you a tech stack to use. If you're not going to use it effectively, that's a challenge that we're going to have, because we're going to ask you to do a bunch of stuff. We're going to give you the tools to make you successful. If you don't use those tools to make you successful, it's a performance question. So for us, when it comes to AI, I'm okay using it. I think it doesn't change the way the behaviors that I look for. Like, did you set yourself up for success? AI is one of those things. Are you going to use the tools at your disposal? But then are you going to ask the questions that you need answered so that you can actually prompt a AI agent properly, if that's the way you're going to do it? The second part is you have an opinion. Like, you can't fake if you are trying to explain something and you really don't believe in it or it wasn't your idea. Like, we can read through that pretty quickly in our line of questioning how we're responding and interacting to you on the phone. And the reality is you still have to present the thing. And so you have to talk through the narrative. You have to explain the different data points and the structure of that. And so what we're still looking for is your critical thought. If you're going to use tools to help you create a pretty slide deck, think about how the words are formatted, build graphs, more power to you. Take those, 5-6 hours and turn them into 4 and save yourself a couple hours after to do this faster. Like, great. That actually shows, I think, for me at least, more initiative and more proactivity that you're going to use your ecosystem, whether it's process, tools, people, to your advantage to make sure that you are the most successful in whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Yeah, very much resonates with me. The idea of like the foundation has to still, the intention, the foundation of what you're doing, you still have to be thoughtful about and really think through. And then there's some new tools you can layer on top of that to potentially do it better, do it faster. But yeah, whether you're writing a job requisition or whether you are you're writing a prompt or responding to a prompt, you still have to do kind of the thought work to think about, like, what is the best way to go about this? And I think that still has to be human, at least at this point, to your point.
Oh, yeah. I mean, how many times have you prompted AI? And I do this all the time. It's like I give it a prompt and I'm like, well, I asked that question really poorly. And as a result, no wonder I got like a ridiculous response that did not know what I was looking for at all.
Yes. As long as we're on the topic of AI and AI fluency, one of the things that you mentioned to me is that you don't directly ask about it typically in interviews, but you're kind of seeing more how people might approach it. And I wonder what that tells you about a candidate that maybe a direct question around AI wouldn't.
I think the reason I don't ask about AI is that if I ask about AI, I know the candidate knows I'm leading towards, I want an AI response. And there's a lot of ways you can, as a candidate experience or asking a question, you lead the person to what the answer is you're looking for. And a lot of people are intelligent beings. They kind of can understand that context. I generally ask about repeatability, scalability, things that have been applicable for our entire careers, of like, how do you actually be effective at scale and be highly productive? And what I'm looking for is like, are you going to bring in innovative, new, thoughtful techniques that are cutting edge of the industry or cutting edge of things? Or are you going to challenge the way I think? Because like sometimes I'll occasionally get a candidate who brings in a really interesting idea or really interesting tech that I hadn't even heard of that like helps me become better, helps our team become better. But I look for that. And right now, what we're seeing is a lot of people who answer that question about, especially as a leader, we have a fairly large customer base here at ZI. And so scalability is a big thing for us. And we rely a lot on process and technology to create that scale and that repeatability. And so I'll have candidates talk to me just about like old school automation and like workflows, but not proactively bring up how AI layers into that. And I think that just kind of shows me where their experience is. Are they evolving with how the industry is moving, how trends are changing, or are they stuck with what they did and what they know from 5, 10 years ago, or even with the boom of AI 2 years ago? And they haven't done the research, they haven't invested the time to stay up to date so that they can actually create, drive, and define like the best in class strategies as we go forward. I think for us also, because our product is very heavily anchored on an AI components. If you don't know how to do that and bring that into your data job, how are you supposed to guide and advise customers on how to leverage AI within their existing go-to-market stack? How can you advise what works, what doesn't work? Where are people seeing ROI? Where are they not? And how does this all work together within their existing ecosystem? It becomes hard. So I try to not lead, which is why I don't ask for it. I don't try not to lead to the answer that they think I want, but give them a chance to say like, well, what has your experience taught you? What have you seen? And using that to say like, are you going to bring in the concept of AI and talk to tools, or are you going to stay and talk to me about automation and data analysis and all these kind of things that was what we were stuck with a few years ago in order to create scale?
I love the thoughts there on just like assessing for growth mindset, almost by not asking as directive questions and just seeing what people come up with and where they're actually spending time as opposed to, and like where they're actually learning as opposed to kind of leading them towards the answer that you want. I think that's a great insight. As you think about the back half of the process then, or like the end of the process, we were chatting a little bit about work-life balance. And is that a yellow flag to ask about? Is it a red flag to ask about it? Walk me through your thinking there and when does it signal maybe a problem versus when's it a legitimate question?
Yeah, people on my team react differently to me when I say this. Like, I don't like the question a candidate asks me of like, how's work-life balance? It kind of drives me crazy. I think this, irregardless of what your philosophy is around work-life, if there is a work-life balance, is there not a work-life balance? Do you just live in this world where they both exist? My challenge with that, specifically as a senior leader, is if you don't qualify why you're asking that question, what it immediately signals to me, and this may be my own bias, is that you don't have the skill set to be really effective with your prioritization and your ability to operationalize what you're actually doing and organize that thought. And you're looking for someone else, whether the company, your boss, externally, to manage your time for you. As a senior leader, you're always going to get asked for more than you actually have physical hours in the day to do, let alone like, I've got young kids at home, and so I want to be an active parent as well. I'm looking for someone who can create the boundaries, create the prioritization in a really effective way that they can manage themselves. Because one, it'll let me know that I can trust them to get the job done, but that two, they can manage their teams and guide their teams to how to like do that. If you're earlier in your career, I think that's totally a valid question. You're building that skill set. You're building that kind of repertoire on like, how do you set boundaries? How do you prioritize your day? How do you structure everything that you're going to get asked to do? And that's where having a leader who's really effective at doing that is going to be important. So if you're asking me and your director plus, your V plus, how like, what's work-life balance like, without giving me some qualification as to why you're asking for that, maybe it's because you coach a team on the side or something like that, then it gives me this kind of immediate reaction that like, wait, can you not prioritize? Do you understand the demands of this role, that so much of our time is not our own during the workday? The number of times, whether it's a customer that needs something, whether it's escalation or a team member needs something, where you're all of a sudden your entire day has to shift around, but the work doesn't change. Your ability to quickly move through that and still be really highly effective is important, and something as a senior leader I expect you to be able to do and come in with that knowledge. And so again, that is a yellow flag / red flag. Yellow flag if you can qualify it properly, if it's a red flag because you're looking for me to structure your day to day. that's a concern.
I actually I think for our audience too, it might be interesting. Like if you flip that, how would you think about getting at that then in an interview process yourself in a way that like gives you some sense of, am I ever going to see my kids? Like how do you tease that out then in a way that's effective?
In terms of sensing, yeah, I think this is where when you talk to people, like in an interview process, you're talking, especially as a senior leader. I don't know how many people I talk to around there. It's a lot of asking of them about their day-to-day, asking them about their priorities, asking them about what's working, what's not working, and using that as insight into, okay, is this really going to lean heavy into like work balance, or is this going to have a little bit of balance? And then you can usually suss out through those kinds of discussion, just focusing on them, on how much is within your control versus how much is just going to be like overwhelming demand. I think this is also interesting, like the concept of just like back channel. This industry is so small, it's tech space. The customers, like everybody kind of has, avenues into different places of like, if that's really concerned or you're starting to see indication or signals that like you're never going to see your kids, find a channel that kind of comes around and in that shows that you're doing your due diligence. The company's going to reference check you. Why don't you reference check them too a little bit and just make sure that you're kind of going and doing your diligence, that this is the right place for you as well as you being the right person for the company. I think there's a lot of ways you can kind of get around it by focusing on the existing employees who are in the space, asking them about, their priorities, what is their strategy, how are they looking at things, what is their leadership type style like, what is the management style like, and making sure that fits and resonates. I think you'll quickly see in interview cycles if someone's completely burnt out versus someone who's found a balance that works for them.
Yeah, and I love your point on references and potential employees doing them as well. And I'll put a +1 on that. They should absolutely do it, and they should get in and dig in and understand what they're getting, because that makes the fit better for everyone.
Oh yeah, like the interview cycle goes both ways. You're selling as much as trying to buy something.
Last question for you: who's the best hire you ever made, and why?
Yeah, I've made some good hires. I was trying to think about this because I had a feeling you were going to ask. I will say there was a woman on my team at DocuSign, came through a referral. She started as an individual contributor, moved to leadership levels. I mean, she was a Swiss Army knife. Like you could throw her any problem, any challenge, and she was just such a domain expert in her space. That was great. But I will say, like, she wasn't my best hire because of that. She was my best hire because of her ability to attract and keep talent. The teams that she developed, and she actually built quite a few of the customer success teams at DocuSign. Like her ability to suss out and get through candidates in a really high quality way, and then bring people in that I thought we had no business hiring. Like so far, so much more experience than that we would normally be able to command, just because of like her ability to sell them and keep them motivated. It's one of those things where like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to work for her at some point. She's amazing. I think that's probably the best one, and I would hire anyone she's ever hired too. So that's why I would put her as the top of that list.
Love it. Well, I appreciate you making time to join us and to spend some time and just share so many brilliant insights with us today. Thank you. And really appreciate you coming on.
This was awesome. Thanks. A lot of fun.